I thank you for committing your time to learning more about college planning and funding. I can assure you of one thing about this presentation, and that is that I believe you will be better prepared to meet the late-stage college planning challenges after listening to this talk. You may be wondering, why is a financial professional up here today talking about college? I do this as a service to my clients and my community because I've seen many families struggle with this issue. Getting kids through grade school and then high school is hard enough. You've been working and working, maybe saving for the eventual college tuition, then boom, your kid is a junior or senior in high school, and you realize that you haven't planned enough. The cost of tuition plus room and board are higher than you expected. Stress increases as you receive piles of slick brochures from fancy colleges and hear your friends talk about where their kids are going. And as we just talked about, this leads to poor decisions which may negatively impact your family's financial health for years, even decades to come. I've seen that happen, and I want to help you before you get to that stage. Your son or daughter can go to a good school, have a great college experience, and do it without saddling you with undue debt. I've seen it happen. That's why I do this presentation. It used to be that homeowners planned to pay off their mortgages and live out retirement debt-free. But a 2018 survey by national mortgage firm American Financing found that 44% of Americans between the ages of 60 and 70 have a mortgage when they retire. Nearly 17% think it's possible they will never pay off a mortgage. A stunning 32% predict it will take more than 8 years. Why is that? For many families, it's the price of sending their child to a costly college. We've all heard student college loan debt is growing. Americans owe $1.7 trillion in student loan debt, 43 million borrowers as of 2022. 3 million people over 60 are still paying off college loans. The percentage of families headed by someone 50 or older with student loan debt is more than tripled between 1989 and 2016, from 3.1% to 9.6%. Since 2004, student loan debt among those 60 and older has grown the fastest among any age group. According to the Government Accountability Office, 114,000 people over 50 and older had their Social Security payments garnished in 2015 to repay student debt. The problem that we're dealing with is that families often overpay for college, take on too much debt, and hurt their savings and retirement plans because they tumbled unprepared into late-stage college funding pressure cooker. It's hard to think about college planning as a major financial planning challenge for families when you just want to send your kids to a good school. And there's nothing wrong with that. But we need context for understanding all the forces that will come into play. Here's a quick rundown of many of the key aspects of this challenge. Students and parents feel the academic and social pressures of competition. Colleges target your child, wanting him or her to apply mostly so they can reject the application. Impending deadlines promote tension and rash decisions. Your student's college list may be unrealistic, influenced by popular ranking lists, and uninformed about actual cost, degree earnings power, and the average number of years to graduation. School counselors aren't trained to help families figure out how to pay for college. Families lack knowledge and guidance. All these dynamics contribute to something none of us want to have happen, overpaying for college. And that's why we're here today. The late-stage college funding pressure cooker can deliver some very unhappy results. Families act rashly, and as a result, many parents tap home equity or take out a large second mortgages to pay for college. As we saw earlier, many have not paid off those debts by the time they retire. Some divert retirement funds to pay tuition and have to work longer than they had hoped for or planned. The glaring truth is that most families just lack knowledge and guidance on how to get the best price for college. Now, I don't want to make things seem completely hopeless. The fact that you're here today indicates that you're ready to tackle what is a very big financial planning issue for families. That's a good sign because, as you'll see, there are steps to start taking now that will make this period in your life seem less stressful. You'll be less pressured if you have late-stage college funding strategy. But you're probably tired of me introducing all the complications. You're thinking, what's the most important thing that I need to know so that I can avoid overpaying? That brings us to our first key. Parents must lead the college selection process with child as a co-pilot because you have the most to lose. Lose means picking the wrong school, overpaying for it, or underestimating the total cost, including how many years it actually takes to earn a degree. I'm not saying that the student shouldn't be involved in the college planning process. That's not true at all. But the parents need to know what they are willing to pay and where the money comes from. It's all too easy to go into the searching process blindly, looking at every school that shows up at a college fair or sends you glossy marketing materials. Then the student falls in love with a certain school and the parents end up paying much more than he could afford. It's much better to know your facts and figures at the beginning and search for colleges with eyes wide open. Here are a few items about college that you don't see or hear about much, but I want to put them in front of you as part of your understanding why it's so important for you to be running the college selection process for your child. Retention rates. 24% of college students drop out after the first year. 9% transfer to another college for their sophomore year. College dropouts are 4 times more likely to default on student loans than those who graduate. There are several large organizations, most notably U.S. News & World Reports, who love to tout their college rankings. Don't be fooled. These are not lists you should use to determine your child's college lists. Why? Because they encourage institutional bad behavior, cheating, and admission tricks. Have a formula that can be gamed. Make popularity a big ratings factor. Use 6-year graduation rates. Encourage schools to favor affluent students through merit scholarships. Don't measure what's important. Next, you might be wondering, so let's say I'm in charge of leading this process. The news is filled with the rising price of college. Can I send my child to a good school at all without blowing my savings? The answer is yes, which brings us to our second main point. The news media likes to hype up the rising costs of college and staggering student loans. These are all true, but they miss the important details that higher education is actually a buyer's market, despite news about increased costs and high rejection rates. Price discounts are quite common among state universities as well as private institutions. Schools give discounts through grants and scholarships. One thing you should take away from this slide is that it's clearly not just A students who get scholarships and grants. Just look at the high percentages of students getting price breaks. Nearly everyone who attends private college receives some type of price cut from his or her school. For years now, the tuition discount has been creeping up. The percentage of students who receive grants and scholarships at private schools is actually at a historic high. The average tuition discount at private colleges and universities is also a historic high. The discount is 62%. On the slide, you'll see an example of how the discount slashes the tuition price. You might naturally be wondering why schools are giving out so much money. Here's the reason. For most schools, it's a buyer's market. This might seem strange because all the media attention is focused on the most elite universities that reject nearly all applicants. The schools at the top of their rankings compete to see who can reject the most teenagers. Most schools, however, don't enjoy this kind of advantage. They have to work hard to fill their freshman slots, and to do that, they offer financial enticements to get students to come to their schools. Here's a closer look at what colleges are up against during the admissions season. Why the price cuts? College is a buyer's market except for the most elite schools. Only 36% of admission directors at state schools meet their goals by May 1st. 85% of admission directors at private and public schools were moderately or very concerned about meeting their enrollment goals. Only 5% of admission directors said they hadn't been concerned about meeting their enrollment goals for 22 and 23. Now, you might be feeling intrigued or overwhelmed with this new information. Regardless, you probably want to know what are the key things to focus on in order to successfully navigate the college funding process. Gather the pegs for your school to start the process of identifying the best deal and best price. PEGS is an easy acronym that we created that speaks to some key information gathering that will get you going in your college journey. And PEG stands for Price, Expected Family Contribution, Graduation Rate, and Salary. Let's look at each briefly. We start with price, which means net price calculators. You'll use these tools to discover a school's true costs. Let's take a look. One of the most infuriating aspects of the college admission process is that traditionally families couldn't know what any college was going to cost until their child received his or her financial aid or merit award package. Even worse, they might not have gotten the offer until the spring, which would give them little time to select a school by the deposit deadline, which has traditionally been May 1st. Applying to schools, however, doesn't have to be a financial crapshoot if you use a net price calculator before your child applies to any colleges. A net price calculator is supposed to provide you with a personalized estimate of what particular school will cost. The net price represents what a student will have to pay after scholarships and grants from the federal and state governments and the school itself are subtracted. The net price equals the true price of the college because it only considers free money and disregards loans when calculating the cost of a school. Federal law requires schools to post a net price calculator for freshmen on their websites. Some schools also provide a calculator for transfer students. If you want to avoid budget-busting schools, it's critical to know what the actual prices of a particular school will be before your child falls in love with them. In fact, turning to your net price calculator could ultimately save you tens of thousands of dollars by focusing your efforts on schools that will be more generous to your family. Too many parents get guilted into paying for college that far outstrips their budget. This can jeopardize their own retirement plans. Knowing in advance what school costs will help families draw up an appropriate college list and reduce or eliminate financial surprises. Thanks to the net price calculators, there's no reason why students and parents can't have a pretty good idea of what college will offer before they decide to apply. Helpful calculators will require information from your tax return and your latest non-retirement investment account statements. You want to gather them up before using the calculators. Your family should turn to the calculators to get a handle on what sort of applicants capture the best awards at an institution. What kind of grade point averages or test scores does it take for a student to win a greater award from a specific school? With this tool, families can manipulate the figures to see whether or not it'd be worth it for their child, for instance, to take the SAT or ACT again. Would a higher test score boost the child's potential package? Would a slightly higher GPA matter? It could also be important to measure what impact, if any, a family's home equity would have on an award. With so much money at stake, it's worth taking the time to use these calculators strategically. It can be hard finding a net price calculator on some school websites. An easy way to do it is to Google the name of the school and net price calculator. You need to understand that not all calculators are good ones. The weakest calculators rely on the federal template. Using these could take less than a minute to complete. The questions are minimal, which leads to dubious cost estimates. The federal calculator only asks for income ranges, but a good calculator will require figures off your latest income tax return. Bad calculators also rely on old cost data. Some net price calculators are still using 2017 and 18 costs, so check how old the figures are. These federal calculators are only meant to provide personalized cost estimates to families seeking need-based aid. And even then, the needs-based aid answers are simply averages. They do not calculate merit scholarships. If you see these icons displayed on a website, it means the school uses the federal net price calculator. Not all schools that use the federal calculator, however, will display these icons. Now let's move to the E in PEGS. This stands for Expected Family Contribution. This is a federally calculated number that tells you what you're expected to pay. Your expected family contribution is a dollar figure that represents what a financial aid formula believes your household should be able to pay for 1 year of your child's college education. For schools that strictly use the free application for federal student aid, the new term for EFC is Student Aid Index. The CSS profile, which is the other major aid application, will continue to use the term EFC. Your SAI or EFC is not necessarily what you'll pay. Your EFC SAI is based on the number of factors including income, non-retirement money, education account assets, size of your household, and marital status of the parents. The CSS profiles also cares about the number of students in college. The EFC SAI will give you a good idea whether you will qualify for needs-based aid or if you should seek out schools that provide merit scholarships. This helps you as you go shopping for colleges. It can be tricky. 2 EFC financial aid formulas exist. The federal formula is tied to the free application for federal student aid, FAFSA. This is the federal aid application that students must complete to qualify for federal and state aid at any school they attend. The vast majority of colleges will also use this FAFSA to determine who will receive their own in-house aid. I'll explain the FAFSA more in just a second. The institutional formula is tied to the CSS profile, which is a creature of the College Board. This formula is used by less than 200 private schools to determine who will get their in-house money. A tiny number of public universities, including University of Virginia and University of Michigan, also use the profile. The two formulas do have some significant differences. Sometimes the EFCs using each of the formulas will be similar, but other times they will not. To qualify for federal and state aid, families must file their FAFSA. The vast majority of state and private colleges and universities also use the FAFSA to determine who will get their own institutional needs-based aid. The schools that use the CSS profile will use that aid application to determine who receives their own institutional financial aid. Starting with the 2024-2025 admission season, the lowest federal EFC a family can have is now a negative $1,500. That means a student experiences extreme poverty and has no ability to pay for college. In contrast, there is no cap on an EFC for high-income families. It's possible to have an EFC of $60,000, $80,000, or $100,000 or higher. When the EFC is high and a needs-based aid is out of the question, you look for schools that provide merit scholarships to affluent students. As I said before, it's best to get a ballpark idea of what your EFC SAI will be in your child's freshman year of high school or even earlier. Obtaining a preliminary EFC will give you a rough idea of what kind of financial obligation you will face. Families will usually have to pay more for college than their EFC indicates that they can afford because most schools do not meet 100% of the students' demonstrated financial need. Consequently, it's important to identify the most generous schools that would consider your child an attractive candidate. We'll go into more details about this later. Let's look at a higher income family. This family has more assets, home equity, and considerably more income. There are 4 in the household with married parents and the oldest heading to college. The EFC SAI for this household ranges from $50,319 to $42,776. There would be some elite schools that would provide this family with a needs-based aid, but with the vast majority of schools, the family would be looking for institutions that provide hefty merit scholarships to higher income students. There is no cap on a family's EFC, so some very wealthy parents will have EFCs that exceed the cost of an expensive private university. Here is an example of how much aid a family with an EFC of $3,479 could be eligible for when applying to an expensive school. It's important to add only 6 dozen or so colleges or universities say they meet the full financial needs of their students. So to sum it up, let's look at college funding strategies informed by 2 different EFCs. First, families with a small EFC should look for colleges that provide generous needs-based financial aid, as well as their own state schools that will have needs-based programs for residents and typically lower prices. Remember, it's also important to file the FAFSA as early as you can since students tend to receive twice as much grant money from the state programs and state universities. Write down the date you file for your FAFSA. The first date to file is October 1st of your child's senior year. Now families with large EFCs should look for private and state schools that give good merit aid to many students. The most elite private universities tend to give little or no merit scholarships because they have plenty of high-income students who will come without a price break. So that gives you a sense of how the EFC plays out. After you obtain your EFC, you can hone in on what type of schools are the most appropriate to aim for. The G in PEG stands for graduation rate. This part of your school's analysis is looking at what percentage of students graduate and how long it takes them. Parents assume that their children will graduate in 4 years, but this usually doesn't happen. According to federal statistics, the 4-year grad rate for private colleges and universities is 54% and 37% for state schools. It's always important to check the 4-year grad rates since a delay in graduation can significantly boost the cost of college. There can be major differences among the same type of schools as well as different majors, so always check. Always check a school's freshman retention rate. Ideally, you want a school with very high percentage of freshmen who return for a second year. If schools on your list don't have a high retention rate, find out why. On average, a student now requires 5.3 years to graduate from a 4-year institution. Over 30% of students will not graduate in 6 years. For students with marginal GPA scores or weak academic background, the probability of graduating is even worse. Half of college dropouts become delinquent on their student loans within 3 years of leaving college. A source for 4-year graduation rates is the Federal College Navigator. This is a screenshot of how the school's graduation rates will be presented. You will also see freshman retention rates. Unfortunately, a lot of resources of graduation rates only share 6-year or even 8-year graduation rates. What you want to look for is a 4-year graduation rate, which is just common sense. I don't know any parent who wants to pay for 5 or more years of college. The S in PEG stands for salary. As part of your evaluation process, you may also want to look at a school's salary outcomes and consider them in the context of how much you're paying for your child's degree. Parents tend to overpay based on assumptions and rankings, but a big investment isn't always worth it. Many families assume that salary will be largely driven by the school a student attends. Get into an elite school and a student will be guaranteed a great salary and career. Statistics from the federal government show that the academic major that is selected is hugely important. A great place to check out salary outcomes for individual majors at specific colleges is to take advantage of the ROI research conducted by the Foundation for Research on Equal Opportunity, which is a think tank. Using federal data, researchers calculated the ROI for 30,000 bachelor's degrees and 14,000 graduate degrees. Another resource for overall earnings at individual schools is the Federal College Scoreboard. but it doesn't break down salaries by majors. Getting clarity about the pegs for schools on your list is very helpful, but it's not the whole picture yet. You're still probably wondering, will my kid qualify for financial aid, and how does it fit with grants, scholarships, and loans? That brings us to the fourth key. The common question, will my kid qualify for aid, is best answered when you understand how discounts, scholarships, and loans work to produce the lowest college costs possible. Let's look at all types of financial aid first. There are 4 that you see here. Just so we're all on the same page, let's run through their definitions quickly. First, we have grants. They don't need to be repaid. They're primarily need-based, and they're often from state or federal government such as Pell Grants. The second related source of money is scholarships. They don't need to be repaid. They are usually awarded based on merit or other criteria such as geographic location, talents, athletics, academic merit, etc. And they come from a variety of sources such as private foundations, corporations, and colleges themselves. And then there are loans. We won't go deeply into college loans for now, but there are 2 main types of federal loans strictly for the student. The more attractive option is the direct subsidized loan, where the government pays the interest while the student is in school and during the grace and deferment periods. There must be a demonstrated financial need to qualify for this loan. Then there is the direct unsubsidized loan, where the student pays the interest during all periods or defers interest while enrolled, which will accumulate. There is no financial need required for the federal unsubsidized loan. We also have Direct Plus loans for parents. These loans are designed to help families pay for education expenses not covered by other financial aid. And finally, here are some other options. You could get a home equity loan. Keep in mind the length of the repayment period and how that will impact your retirement plans. You can also get private loans to pay for colleges. These typically require very good to excellent credit. There are a range of institutions that underwrite these types of loans. Now, about 2/3 of students pay for college with the help of scholarships and grants. That type of financial assistance comes from 4 sources you see here. The 2 biggest sources are from the federal government and institutions themselves. Okay, let's look at what comprises federal aid. These are the 3 sources of federal help for parents and students. Most are income-based grants and work-study jobs, loans for students and parents, and tax credits such as the American Opportunity Tax Credit and the Lifetime Learning Tax Credit. Families who are shut out of federal grants can qualify for federal college loans since there are no income limits. However, without filing the FAFSA, parents and students do not have access to federal student and parent loans. The vast majority of federal money is awarded through the Pell Grant program. The maximum Pell Grant award is currently $7,395. Most families who are eligible for at least a partial Pell Grant have incomes below $70,000. The larger the family income and the smaller the size of the household, the lower the potential Pell award. So that's the federal government. Let's talk about the states. All states have aid programs, but they vary in what they offer. Most state grants go to students who require financial assistance. Some states, however, are dispensing most or all of their aid based on such factors as grade point averages and standardized test scores. Most of the states that award the majority of their aid by merit are located in the South, and these programs often benefit more affluent students. You can find links to the aid programs that are available in each of the 50 states by visiting the website of the National Association of Student Financial Aid Administrators. Unless money is no object, it makes sense for a student to include one or more in-state public universities on their college list. In-state schools, however, won't always be the least expensive option, even though that is a widely held belief. If you need financial aid, you need to be aware that public universities very rarely give need-based aid to non-residents. State universities routinely reserve that money for their residents. The tuition price for non-residents is typically 2 to 3 times higher. Non-residents looking for college money should consider merit scholarships, which are awarded regardless of income. The percentage of college money devoted to merit scholarship has grown dramatically. State schools often have too many applicants to look at a student holistically. A school could have tens of thousands of applicants. Consequently, state universities must rely heavily on GPA and SAT/ACT scores to make admission decisions and dispense merit awards. This makes it easier to get a good sense of what kind of merit scholarship a student might qualify for at a public university. Use Google to find scholarships that individual school offers. Scholarships can be easier to get and larger at state universities that are less popular. Keep in mind that many of the most popular state universities, which enjoy great brand names or are located in desirable locations such as near a ski slope, can command higher prices for outside students. The sticker prices are going to be lower at schools that aren't in high demand. For affluent students, the most likely source of money will come from the colleges themselves. The vast majority of private schools provide merit money to affluent students. These colleges also provide need-based aid. More than 20% of college students are enrolled in private, nonprofit colleges. Many parents automatically assume that the private colleges will be too expensive and don't consider them, which can be a mistake. It's true that the price tags for private schools are more expensive than in-state universities, but the actual price won't always be as high. Think back to key number 2. Higher education is actually a buyer's market. Despite news about increased costs and high rejection rates, for years now the tuition discount has been creeping up. The percentage of freshmen who receive grants and scholarships at private schools is actually at a historic high. It's now at 91%. For families who won't qualify for need-based aid, private colleges and universities routinely award merit scholarships. Schools also widely practice what's called preferential packaging. The best awards go to the applicants that an institution wants the most. A student is more likely to obtain a good package if they're in the top 25% of accepted students at that institution. What families also need to understand is that the more a college costs, the more likely a family will qualify for need-based aid. At some schools, accepted students could end up with both need-based aid and merit scholarships. What really matters is getting a discount. It doesn't really matter whether the discount comes from merit or need-based aid, or a combination of both. If you won't qualify for need-based aid and money is tight, the worst place to apply to college from a financial standpoint are the most highly ranked universities. Look at the top U.S. News rankings and you'll see what kind of schools this includes. Universities in this category include the Ivies, Stanford, MIT, Caltech, and Northwestern. Schools like this are deluged with high-income candidates, so they do not have to offer merit scholarships to attract great candidates who are willing to pay full price. While there are nearly 2,800 four-year colleges and universities in the United States, there are about 6 dozen that claim to meet 100% of the demonstrated financial need for all or most of their freshmen. The schools that are most likely to provide the best need-based aid are elite schools. If you get into schools like these on the slide and your family needs a great deal of financial help, you're likely to get it. In contrast, if you're wealthy and your child gets into one of these highly rated schools, you're likely to pay full price. The schools that offer the most generous need-based aid are among the most highly ranked by the U.S. News and World Report. These schools tend to have large endowments, and they also attract a lot of students who pay full price so they can afford to offer generous packages to those who need help. The schools most likely to provide discounts to nearly all their accepted students are the ones that aren't as well known. Many institutions that fall into this category are colleges and master's levels universities. Colleges often only educate undergraduates and have a few, if any, graduate programs. Master's level universities have few PhD programs and aren't as research intense. In contrast, professor research and educating graduate students are in number 1 and number 2 priorities of research universities. Undergraduates represent the third priority at these schools. The institutions that are least likely to provide the merit awards are research universities. That's because they're so popular that they don't need to offer discounts to as many of their students. High-income students who attend elite research universities are more likely to pay full price or close to it. One way to get a quick look at whether a school will provide good need-based aid or merit awards is to go to the College Data website. Type in the name of the school on the home page and then click on the school's financials link. You'll be brought to a page with the school's cost of attendance. Then scroll down and you'll see some interesting statistics. When looking at college funding statistics, you'll want to see what percentage of students receive merit awards and what the average is. For need-based aid, you want to see what percentage of need did the school typically meet and what percentage of the students had their full need met. You also want to see if the awards drop off after the freshman year, which typically are the highest offers. Now let's look at private scholarships. Private scholarships are outside awards offered by foundations, charities, companies, and civic groups. Parents don't often realize that private scholarships represent the smallest source of college money. The competition for nationally known private scholarships is fierce. In a recent year, for instance, the Coca-Cola Scholars received 112,000 applications for 250 awards. This makes Coca-Cola Scholars about 25 times as selective as Stanford. Your children will face better odds if they focus on capturing local scholarships. These are the scholarships that turn up via high school counselors, libraries, parent workplaces, or in local papers. They aren't as easy to find, so not as many students will be applying. In fact, scholarship sites like fastwebscholarships.com and the College Board's search engine usually don't have these contests in their databases. Students may also have better luck looking at scholarships that require essays, since plenty of teenagers don't want the hassle of this requirement. Students who win private scholarships are often surprised to discover that their awards end up reducing their financial aid package. Since students have to report all outside scholarships to the financial aid offices, many schools see this as an opportunity to save some money and reduce the amount of money they award to the student. In cases where the amount of the scholarship would push the total financial aid award over the cost of attendance, the federal government requires schools to adjust the financial aid award. You can't receive more money than it would cost you to go to a school. Each school maintains its own policy on how it applies an outside scholarship to a student's financial aid package. You'll have to check with each school for its policy regarding outside scholarships. Ironically, this scholarship practice will not affect the students most in a position to afford college. Affluent students who receive merit scholarships from their schools don't have to worry about outside scholarships shrinking their awards. Higher income students who don't qualify for financial aid can earn any number of outside scholarships, and it won't jeopardize their institutional merit scholarships. Okay, so we're getting to the end of our presentation. No doubt many of you are feeling like, yikes, this is so much information. How do we smartly process it and proceed? It's a good question that leads us to our final set of points. So first, let's look at where we started. Families often overpay for college and take on too much debt and hurt their savings and retirement plans because they tumbled unprepared into late-stage college funding pressure cooker. Then we looked at the details behind these main points. Parents must lead the college selection process. Higher education is usually a buyer's market. Gather the pegs: price, expected family contribution, graduation rate, and starting salary to start the process. Understand how financial aid works to get the best price. This brings us naturally to the conclusion that you need to start developing your college funding strategy now by getting an expected family contribution analysis. From that baseline, you can begin to gather the rest of the critical information you need to start the hunt for the right school with the lowest possible tuition while protecting your retirement plans. I'd like to leave you with one last thought. Paying for college is one of the biggest purchases in your life, next to your house. So, do your research and get it right. Now I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.